Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider, but it's not another episode. It is a very special episode. Aaron Nagler of CheeseheadTV is joining me, and we are not just going to do our usual Vikings and Packers chatter back and forth. No. Because first of all, there's no football this weekend, and that made me very sad. But also, Aaron, I've taken notice that it is award season. And so you've got Oscars probably and other award shows that come up around this time. And so I put together my own award show for us called the NFC Northies. And there was only one person I asked to co-host the NFC Northies with me, and that was you, Aaron Nagler. What's going on, man?
I'm incredibly honored. I question your judgment. I am very excited to be here. Let's get to it.
Okay. So I have a bunch of categories. We're going to go through it. Some are serious, some are less serious. And the main goal is for us to make fun of the Bears, but also
not too difficult,
but also to break down looking back at this season and also looking forward of what is going to happen in the NFC North. So the only place to begin with an award show is with the obvious types of awards, and they're not all jokes. The best coaching job in the NFC North is our first award. And I think, Aaron, this is a pretty darn difficult one because you have Man Campbell getting them to 15 wins, Kevin O'Connell wildly outperforming expectations, and you have obviously Matt LaFleur dealing with a quarterback injury and working through that, and Matt Eberflus growing a beard, which you as a beard guy,
right,
may put him in the conversation.
May put him in the mix, right? Well, look, I'm sure the expectation out there is for me to say, well, Matt LaFleur did a much better job than you think. But, I mean, I do understand Packers fans may be stumping for Matt, given what he did after, like you talked about, the injury to Jordan Love in week 1, winning the games with Malik Willis. And for a stretch there, like a 5-game stretch, they were putting 30 up on everybody. Like, it didn't matter. But I think ultimately you see how their season dovetailed. They really ran out of steam. I do think O'Connell did a phenomenal job. To your point, definitely much better job than I think the expectations were coming into the season. But I got to give it to Dan Campbell. I really do. And I know people talk about him being a product of his coordinators, and I guess we'll find out. But, man, to lose as much talent as they did throughout this season, obviously starting with the Hutchinson injury, but it was way more than that. To get where they got, to win as many games as they did, to do it decisively in a lot of cases, I give it to Campbell.
I think Dan Campbell is incredibly deserving. I mean, you win 15 games. There's only a handful of times that's ever happened in NFC or in NFL history. And to do it through the injuries that they faced on defense and to do it through his management style, going for it on fourth down as much as they do, like you can see the direct impact from Dan Campbell. But I also would remind you, Aaron, that before this season, Sam Darnold was, I think, 13 games under 500 and had I believe, a 78.6 quarterback rating for his career. This year, 14-3. The Vegas over-under was 6.5. And I think as it went along, we sort of got used to the idea that Sam Darnold was good. And like, he's just their good quarterback. And
until
right.
Right.
And that is the tough part about Campbell versus Kevin O'Connell is the week 18 game. The Lions just destroy the Vikings, and that's a one-on-one matchup. But I don't think it's a one-on-one matchup of roster talent between those two teams, that even with their injuries, Detroit was the much more ready to win the Super Bowl team. And for O'Connell to have more wins than the Vikings had in 2017, more than they had when Brett Favre was here, I think if we do it, which often happens by who exceeded expectations by the most, then O'Connell clearly runs away with it.
It's funny, too, because the Vikings clearly agree with you, given the extension he was just handed, right? I don't doubt for a moment he's going to be a thorn in the side of every NFC North foe, including the Packers. Like I said, I think with Campbell, you look at the talent drain throughout the season and their ability still to dominate opponents. I mean, look, we'll undoubtedly be talking about this all offseason. I think both of them are clearly worthy candidates. And unfortunately, it sucks to say that as a Packers fan, because like I said, I think LaFleur, had a case for a good long while this season, but ultimately they really fell apart down the stretch. And if there is, you've got to pick between two guys, those are the two worthiest, no doubt.
One of the things that you and I, because we speak to one fan base all the time, and the fans and us kind of work with all the same information, we watch all the same games,
Right.
we nitpick away at every single thing the coach does. I try to pull back sometimes with Kevin O'Connell and say, look, well, I do think that they should have had a better screen game against the Rams or something.
Right.
We've got to look at the big picture and talk about just how good these coaches are. And I see you on Twitter with the LaFleur and the fans and things like that. But I think this is the best coached division in the entire NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, like week in and week out. Who's the opponent? What are their strengths, weaknesses? How do they match up? It is such a league of matchups. But yeah, you can't deny the pelts on the wall, so to speak. And we'll see, obviously, with Ben Johnson now in Chicago, where that heads. But I do not doubt for a moment that these teams are going to be kicking each other's butts real good for these next couple of years. And then we'll see, man. LaFleur kind of crashing down in the division this season. That's a warning shot to me. And that's something that's probably a wake up call as far as, he had owned the NFC North for a good long while. And now it's very clear that the division not only caught up, but is starting to surpass them. So that to me is great as a Packers fan because I do think it gives them a little impetus, a little drive, maybe a little kind of reason to get on board and get ready to face these guys twice a year in a way that maybe before it was like, oh, yeah, it's important. It's a division game, but it's just another game. Like, I think that mentality is definitely going to have to switch in Green Bay.
I have two quick LaFleur follow-ups before we move on to our next award, just out of my curiosity. I
Mm-hmm.
was saying the other day that I think that with LaFleur, the pressure really starts next year because now we've established the fact that Jordan Love's a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And once that happens and everyone's like, okay, we've got the answer there. Now, good, great, where on that spectrum, but we know he's good. We know he can win a lot of games, get a team to the playoffs. Now you better win in the playoffs. And
Right.
it's funny how that switches so fast. Like last year, it's wow, look how great he did with Jordan Love. And then this year's like, okay, well, that was all right, but now you better win. Is that a fair way to frame like that the pressure sort of begins now on Matt LaFleur?
Yeah, I think, and that's not any different than the pressure being applied internally, like by themselves. Both Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. Goody said point blank in his end of season press conference, it's time to get back to winning championships or competing for championships. I think that's the expectation. I think people got to remember, when the Packers kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and turned the page from Aaron Rodgers, there was an expectation, although people seem to have amnesia about this, by a lot of the national media, certainly a lot of the pundits. Oh, the Packers are entering the wilderness. Jordan Love's an unknown commodity. And hell, even halfway through his first year as a starter, there was talk of, oh, the Packers got to look at quarterback in the draft. Now, to your point, that's their guy. They do have that position on lockdown for the foreseeable future. So now you go these past two seasons, 9 wins last year, 11 wins this year, playoff berths both times, with both seasons being the youngest team in the league. I think it's fair to say we're talking about surpassing expectations. I think they've done that. But to your point, 1,000,000,000%, yes, the next step, the next expectation is okay, now it's not good enough to just make the playoffs. It's not good enough to keep saying, well, they've done all this as the youngest team in the league. Like that is done. Like that kind of part of the phase, that first phase of the quote unquote rebuild, which apparently lasted 6 games, that's over. Right. And now the expectation is, yes, not only are we getting to the playoffs, we're winning the division and we're making a run to compete and or win a championship. No doubt.
It is such a difficult division where you have 3 teams that all now feel this way. I mean, because the Vikings
Right.
were the cute
No doubt.
story of the league this year, but as soon as JJ McCarthy puts his hands under that center's butt, now all of a sudden it's time to win, right? I mean,
Right.
that's just
It's
how it
true.
goes. Speaking of quarterbacks, best quarterbacking for this year. I don't think it's the easiest answer, other than it wasn't Caleb Williams. That was the
That
not
is
best quarterbacking.
very, very easily answered. And look, I'll withdraw Jordan Love's name right off the bat. I think he had a very inconsistent season. I think you saw a really good stretch coming out of the bye week, the back end of the season, except for those final 2 or 3 games. He started most of those games really slowly. I mean, you saw the game against the Vikings. He certainly came alive as the game went on, and that has been a bit of a problem for this Packers offense and the quarterback. But yeah, I think this is down to Darnold and Goff, right? And for me, I'd probably give it to Darnold. simply because of what you talked about before, expectation-wise, the way he absolutely, I mean, completely turned around his career, obviously, but he was so efficient with the ball up until the final games. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of talk about that this offseason, but man, with Goff, certainly he was efficient. They scored a ton of points, but you do look at their reliance on the run game to set up a lot of what they do. No doubt. Look, man, Goff had a phenomenal year, but he also had games like down in Houston where he threw 5 picks and they still won that game. You know what I mean? Like there's a little support system there for him. Whereas with Darnold, it's not that, yeah, of course, he's got Jefferson. He's got this amazing array of talent around him. There's no doubt, but you still got to deliver. And he did it repeatedly. And I kept waiting, man. It took a little longer than I expected, but I did keep waiting for there's the Sam Darnold we all know and love. And fortunately for Vikings fans, it popped up at the worst possible time there at the end of the year. But on balance, I don't think it's crazy to say that, yes, he was probably the best quarterback in the league.
Folks, I found something that I didn't even know how badly I needed. It's called Rocket Money. Like everybody else, I've got so many subscriptions to different apps and websites that I couldn't keep them all straight, and it takes forever to try to figure it out unless you have Rocket Money. What Rocket Money does is organizes all of my subscriptions into one place and allows me to cancel the ones that I'm not using. No more hunting all over the place for things I'm subscribed to or getting charged for things I'm not using. I know I'm not alone in this because I learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription that is going unused each week. That's a lot of money being spent on nothing. With Rocket Money, you can also easily create personalized budgets with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category and know exactly where your money is going. Get alerts if bills increase in price or there's unusual spending activity or if you are close to going over budget. So you're going to want to check out Rocket Money. It is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of over $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider today. That's rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider. Once more, rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider. I mean, the week or what was it? When did they beat the Packers? 17?
17.
I mean,
yeah.
his quarterbacking in that game was some of the best quarterbacking you have seen against
His
the
teammates
Packers.
seem to agree since they celebrated like it was a Super Bowl.
Hey, maybe that was a mistake. I don't know.
Maybe,
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. But the way, 377 yards in that game. There was one interception, but I mean, he was just so dominant throwing down the field, but
He put
also
the ball in
controlling
some
the game.
insanely tight windows. Packers played predominantly zone coverage, and he picked them apart. And not all of them were layups. Like obviously, the first touchdown, this dude's wide open. Like, yeah, you should hit that. But there are so many throws in that game where it's truly impressive how he anticipated, and he did this all year. As far as the Seattle game, the way he brought them back for the win in that game. There's little doubt in my mind that, again, the conversation will be about the final 2 games this offseason, but on balance, I think he was phenomenal this season.
I think they asked him, it's weird to say because you think of the coach pumped him up and so forth. But I think when you look at the numbers, especially, they asked him to do more than Jared Goff was asked to do. The average depth of target, you mentioned the screens, pushing the football down the field. I think Kevin O'Connell said, this guy's got a number 3 overall arm. So let's just lean into that. Right, exactly. Because if you're just going to run screens and check down with that guy, then, you're not leaning into the right variance. When it comes to Jordan Love, what do you think was the issue? The inconsistency is clear in the results, but why?
It's a lot of factors, as it always is. LaFleur always talks about it takes all 11, right? It's never just the quarterback, though. Having your knee torn up in week 1 certainly doesn't help. And I think you saw that linger throughout the season. Their approach on offense really changed comparative to everything they had done down the stretch in 2023 that had helped Jordan Love and made him really successful, kind of disappeared. obviously you saw the run with Aaron Jones down the stretch where those final 6 games or so, Jordan Love was on fire. And a lot of that was that zone running scheme and marrying things up off play action. That all disappeared this year. And I do think a lot of it, and LaFleur talked about how successful they were running out of the gun. Well, that was great, except they never really married that with anything legitimately, consistently effective in the passing game. That was a huge weapon in Jordan Love's arsenal, so to speak, last season. That all kind of disappeared this year. And I got it. They'll never admit it, but I have to think the knee played a big part of that. Like, and then on top of that, you had the groin issue a couple of weeks after that. I think those plagued him a lot throughout the season. Now, that said, you're still judged by what you put on tape between the white lines week in and week out. And certainly it was not good enough down those kind of final few games from basically Minnesota on. Just way too inconsistent, especially early in games. I do think they'll obviously pick apart their offense this offseason, take the good, kind of redo and rework some of the stuff to hopefully recapture that form that we saw from Jordan down the stretch in 2023. But man, it's also on him. He's got to be more consistent. He's got to be better in his fundamentals. And it's not anything, I'm not saying anything he doesn't know or has said himself, right? But I do think, yeah, there was not only inconsistency within his game, but there was a lot of stuff going around him inconsistently. I mean, the other thing I haven't even talked about is the Packers leading the league in drops. That's something that certainly didn't occur in 2023. So you're bringing along all these young receivers. There's a consistency there. It's just this whole year is about, okay, what did we find that works, i.e. the running game, Josh Jacobs, the power game, etc. How do we build off of that and find something a lot more consistent in the passing game next year?
I think they do need a guy that can be like his go-to, and Justin Jefferson's hard to find. So is
They're a little difficult. Those are
Jamar
tough.
Chase.
Can't
It's
just go
right,
down to the store and get one.
right.
No, no, no doubt.
I've seen that in your feed. We just need like a Justin Jefferson. Like, yeah, that's true. And Jerry Rice.
Yep,
You
that'd be
just
nice.
bring
That'd
them
be
in.
lovely. We'll see.
But he probably needs someone that he can lean on a little bit more. And I also think that there are some quarterbacks who are just going to be high variance even within a season.
Sure.
And what you have to hope for, and I always thought this of Eli Manning and Joe Flacco, where it's like, if he catches fire, you're probably going to go to the Super Bowl.
That's
right?
the thing, because Jordan has shown through his 2 years as a starter, I mean, he is a streaky cat. Like, but to your point, if he gets on a roll, if he finds that groove, he's pretty unstoppable. So it's incumbent upon LaFleur to figure that out and get him in that groove at the start of these games, because it was hard to watch those last 3 or 4 games of the season.
Okay. What's next year's order when we do the NFC Northeast for 2025?
Man, that's a good question. Obviously, I'm saying the Packers on top. I think they figure everything out and they go to the Super Bowl and they win it. After that, it's clearly a race for second place. I will say though, man, if that's the question, I gotta like the Vikings in this scenario, simply because look, everything they did this year was not a fluke. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk about one score games and come falling back to the mean and all that, but man, the one question mark is obviously at quarterback. Outside of that, if they can, bring him along, and it sure looks like O'Connell has that touch, that ability. It's hard for me to sit here and say, well, the Lions aren't going to skip a beat. Losing both of those coordinators, I think they're going to have a ton of talent, and I do think Dan Campbell's a hell of a coach. But those coordinators are both such unknown commodities. I do wonder what that's going to look like. And then there are the Bears. Like, there's Ben Johnson, who, man, good luck running all that stuff with a offensive line that's way worse. And I know they've got the whole offseason to try and fix that, but it's such an unknown when you go from calling plays and being a coordinator to running your own program. And that's what it is. It's a program, and putting all those pieces in place with your general manager. It's just a huge question mark. So it's hard to put them in that conversation yet.
See, I was thinking quarterbacks, like what the quarterback order is, because I'm not sure what to expect from Caleb Williams for next year. When the Vikings played him, the 2 games, one of them, he made about 10 plays that made my eyes pop out.
Yep.
And the other, he made about 10 plays that made me think this guy can never play in the league. So
right.
I guys who hold on to the ball always concern me. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know if they fix it.
You look at what Johnson asked Jared Goff to do. I mean, that's the drill, right? Like, get the ball out of his hands quickly, early, often, get him in rhythm doing that, lean on that running game. And I suspect that will be a pretty key component to what he wants to do to try and support his young quarterback. Because look, people talk about like the plays, you're mentioning there the frustrations of holding on to the ball. I mean, Darnold went through that playoff game. He's holding it way too long. Sometimes you do kind of get locked up, but the talent is undeniable. And I do think Ben Johnson's proven that he is a damn good offensive coach. I don't doubt for a moment that that's priority number one for him, is getting Caleb in a groove and maybe breaking him of some of those bad habits. So we'll see. Now, again, so much has to occur throughout the offseason as far as what does the supporting cast look like? What does the offensive line look like? But man, I ain't going to say it's impossible for him to jump up and become like a legitimate problem in the NFC North. That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I totally agree. And after seeing him in person, this is how I usually have to see players in person
Yes,
to really have
right.
a great feel for him. There were too many times where he made spectacular plays to say, oh, yeah,
No
there's
doubt.
nothing there.
No
Let us
question.
move on to our next award, the Breakout Player of the Year Award. Green Bay's Edgerrin Cooper, Jameson Williams from the Lions, and Andrew Van Ginkel from the Vikings. I'll tell you, man, I didn't know a whole heck of a lot. Talk about seeing in person about Edgerrin Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, who
Where did
is
this
this
cat come
guy?
from? Right.
Where did he
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were saying that about Andrew Van Ginkel, like Van Winkle. Who is this?
Right.
And Jameson Williams stopped gambling on his phone in his hotel long enough to make a lot of plays this year. And no Bears. Just sorry,
No,
Bears. You
never.
just
No,
don't
never
belong
Bears.
here,
Never
and
Bears.
none of your players do.
I would give this to Edgerrin Cooper if he had played a full season, but the combination of his not being able to get on the field early in the season, I mean, he was playing like a handful of snaps early in the year, as far as like 10, 11 snaps a game, if that. And then he finally did start to get worked into the rotation more. One defensive player or defensive rookie of the month, won the defensive rookie of the week a couple times. Certainly you saw the production. You saw it in that Vikings game, the way he really was able to kind of knife through the wash, so to speak, and bring Aaron Jones down for gains that I think if he hadn't been in there had probably been 20-yard gains, became 1-yard gains because of his ability. I think he's certainly worthy of it, but for me, it's Van Ginkel. I mean, the way he absolutely lit up not just the quarterback and was able to get, pressure applied to the QB, but man, his turnover rate. I mean, he had pick sixes and he dropped 2 more. So it's to me like, yeah, you talk about really taking that defense to the next level, because you remember how it really kind of not fell apart, but kind of got figured out towards the end of last year. The injuries kind of caught up to them. Man, they been reloaded on that side of the ball, and Van Ginkel was a major part of it, and he really made that defense a problem week in and week out.
I agree. I think Van Ginkel deserves this. He makes second team All Pro, which is something I'm sure he never could have dreamed of in Miami. He was kind of like the under the radar player that
Yes.
if you really knew ball,
Right.
you would be like, man, that guy's kind of a problem down there. But Brian Flores taking him from being this versatile, interesting player who'd get 5 sacks a year and be decent in coverage to over 10 sacks. A couple of the pick sixes. I mean, I think about that Detroit game. He has one in his hands that he's
That's what I
running
mean.
back for a pick six.
Yep.
If he does, how different is that
The
game? Does
whole
that
game
kind of spark
changes.
them?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. But he was great in coverage. Otherwise, I looked this up when I was doing a feature on him, that there's only a couple guys in the last 10 years who have graded as well by PFF in coverage and had as many quarterback pressures as Andrew Van Ginkel. It was like a season that is super rare. I don't know if you can count on pick sixes year in and year out, but maybe you can for him. And I think Williams is a problem, though, Jameson Williams,
Oh, no doubt.
because
No
he was
question.
kind of nothing for his first couple years. This is a top 5 fastest player in the league, and they seem to know how to use him, which is throw a pass with him in a playoff game. That's how you use him.
Well, that's just Ben Johnson. He's like, I've got all sorts of options after this game. It don't matter. So I'm fascinated to watch how many wide receiver passes he throws in Chicago. But yeah, there's no denying the talent. There's no denying the breakout kind of ability. But comparative to the other two, I'd take the other two over Williams.
Okay, I think we agree on that one. Was there anybody from the Packers that I missed? I mean, I thought Cooper was kind of the
I think
easy
Cooper's
choice.
he's the kind of, like you said, easy choice. It makes a lot of sense. But again, he just didn't play enough, I would think, to win the award.
All right, let's go to our next award, the biggest flop of the year. And the nominations are Matt Eberflus's makeover,
Oh, man.
Sam Darnold in the playoffs, and Matt LaFleur in every big game.
Man, that's unfair to my guy Matt. A lot went on there. There's a lot that goes beyond just LaFleur. I mean, how do you not give it to Darnold in the playoffs? How do you not give it to Darnold in those final 2 games? That final game, everything in hand, first seed overall, and he was off that whole. I mean, right from the jump. I mean, they had open touchdowns he's missing in that game. I mean, you talk about, I joked about it earlier, but that was the moment, right? There's Sam Darnold. It took all year, but there he is at the biggest moment. You desperately needed him to step up. He absolutely lost the plot. And then to do it again in that playoff game, look, I'm not saying LaFleur was awesome this year. Eberflus is a bit of a joke, but yeah, Darnold, you talk about the expectations, everything he had built, and then to just have it all fall apart in a 2-week stretch, that's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, and I think that people have conflated those 2 games as being the same, but they're really not in the way that they played out.
No, I agree.
The Rams game, we saw Justin Herbert lose that game in the playoffs. We saw CJ Stroud. If you're getting pressured every single time by beast defensive lines, you're not going to have a lot of success. And I didn't think that he was given options or a run game or a screen game or whatever.
It seemed weird,
against
right?
the Rams.
Like,
yeah.
as that game goes along, and I haven't rewatched it, but everything I kept feeling like, okay, at some point O'Connell's going to adjust and he's going to have like easy flare routes or like some screens for his running back or whatever. But it kept being like, we're just going to run everybody like 20 yards downfield and Darnold's going to have to sit back there. And I know there's the Paul Allen radio call, like, you got to throw it, man. Like, it's like, yeah, but to who? Like, it did feel like there was a great adjustment from O'Connell in that game.
And 2 of the biggest sacks that he took were cornerback blitzes out of condensed sets, which it seemed the Rams knew exactly what to attack there.
Special. Yeah,
yep.
No doubt.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly what Spags did on that big play against Buffalo.
Absolutely.
If you get the receivers close to the line of scrimmage, you're bound to face that, and they weren't prepared for it, which to me was on coaching to some extent. And the 4th and 2 that they failed on, they tried to go for 4th down, kind of a big moment in the game. There's one receiver that's within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Everybody else is at least 10 to 15 yards downfield on 4th and 2.
We call that the McCarthy special. It was like watching Mike McCarthy all over again. That was how we always used to talk about that with Rodgers, because the knock on Rodgers was always he holds the ball too long. Well, everyone's running 25 yards down the field and he's got nowhere to go with it. So yeah, sometimes it's not all on the quarterback.
So Sam Darnold did flop in that game, but the Lions game, the throws were there. The guys were there, and atrocious. He just didn't make it.
That was a really poor performance and a shocking one. I will say, it's so weird that like I was surprised watching it live. Like, these are throws he made just the week before, he's carving up the Packers with these insanely laser guided throws. Where was that? I needed some of that against Green Bay, but then he does it out there in Detroit. I don't know, man, but it was shocking.
Maybe if the entire world said to you, hey, Aaron, your next podcast, if you're good, you got 50 million on the line.
Right.
And if you're bad, are you going to be a little nervous?
Maybe a little bit, a little tight, no doubt. No question.
That could be. How about our next award, the getting owned moment of the year?
This is great.
Okay. So here's the nominations.
Right.
Tyreek Stevenson taunting the fans as the Hail Mary is going on behind him.
Amazing.
And then he's the one that tips it to Washington for the Chicago Bears to lose that game. Dan Campbell pulls in Kevin O'Connell. We'll see you in 2 weeks, like he's Jesse Ventura or something. They did see each other maybe on vacation.
Maybe in Cancun, right?
And Matt Eberflus's Thanksgiving meltdown and then instant firing. All you got to do is this, my friend. Just form a little T. Chris Webber did it. Just like that. The getting owned moment of the year.
I can't give it. The Eberflus thing just feels like by rote. Like, it's just what I expect. Like, there's nothing surprising about it. Like, yeah, you told me before that game, guess what? It's going to come down to this, and Eberflus is totally going to freeze up and completely blow the game. I'd be like, yep, makes total sense to me. And the Campbell thing, it's like, I didn't read that as Ventura. I read that as, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Like, it was a throwaway. Like, of course, it was caught on camera and got blown up because of it. But, like, that didn't feel like, yeah, they didn't end up winning their games in the playoffs. But whatever. Like, that was nothing. The Stevenson thing, that is fucking hilarious. And the fact that that was the swing of their entire season. I mean, remember, they were in a really good spot. If they just knock that ball down, they're at 5-2 on the year. It's unbelievable to me how you can delineate, you can draw a line to that play, completely blowing up their entire season because you had the game won. Yeah, to me that there is no competition here. It is definitely Tyreek Stevenson.
And the narrative coming out of that game would have been like, hey, Caleb Williams had a bad game, but pulled out a great drive. He was
Great
let
drive
down
at the end, which he did, by the way.
Yeah, he
He had
did.
a
They tried
really
to
good
hand it off.
drive.
They tried to hand it off to a guard, and
Oh
so
my
they let
gosh. On the
down
goal
Caleb
line,
Williams
right,
there. Right.
right.
Yeah, that was insane. And then Tyreek Stevenson. And if it's just a regular Hail Mary, I think if it's just a regular Hail Mary, you'd be like, wow, that was so random.
Amazing, right?
But the fact that he was taunting the fans first, and then he tips it up in the air like that, and also the subsequent, all the players going to the media being like, Eberflus sucks. Like them all blaming him instantly for that.
That's what
happening.
I mean. The cascading from that moment is just incredible to behold. No doubt.
And then not that he was ever good at managing a game, but it almost felt like after that Eberflus became worse because it was like he was sort of dealing with everybody watching, like everyone's paying attention to me in these last moments, and froze up. I don't know. That was one of the great moments of the NFL season for 2024.
No doubt.
The not great moments are our next award, the worst refereeing mistake of the year. The nominations for this are Sam Darnold's face mask on Thursday Night Football, in which his head nearly came off of his body 8 feet away from the referee.
The official was looking right at it.
The non-fumble recovery by the Packers, in which the gentleman falls directly on the ball, has it in his hands, and is down, and somehow that football belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles, who, side note, have one of the easiest runs to Super Bowls 2 times.
Yeah.
Whether it's Brock Purdy getting hurt, or whether it's facing Washington instead of Detroit, getting a fake fumble. So that played a role. And the non-face mask in the Lions and Washington game, in which the player clearly just grabbed the shoulder of another player.
15-yard penalty.
Got a 15-yard penalty. It didn't end up impacting the game, but it was
I was going to say, like, it's horrible. You hate to see it, but again, that happens. Like, I get it. Like, you saw the motion of the player and you threw the flag, whatever. Like, that happens. I can't get too worked up about it. I'll ask you this, sir, because I know you're probably going to say it's the freaking Vikings call, but let me ask you this. What had the Vikings done all second half in that game other than butt kiss? And then now you're telling me Vikings fans just cried all week. Oh, they didn't throw the flag in the end zone. Because what? What was going to happen? You had no time. You're going to what? Go down the field and score, which you hadn't done all half? Like, I understand. It was an egregious miss. The player himself puts his hands up like, oh, I didn't touch him, even though we all saw you did. But give me a break, like anything was going to happen, even if that gets called. It's clearly awarding the Eagles that fumble. It is so obviously that. Because who knows how that game goes if the Packers are able to march down the field, even get a field goal, rather than 7 seconds into the game, the Eagles have the ball in the red zone, and they score a touchdown and make it 7-0. And what's atrocious to me is that the clear video evidence, which is what they always talk about, shows Keyshawn Nixon with the ball. So what are we doing here? Oh, by the way, and that's a hit that was illegal that the NFL touted on their Twitter channel. Oh, look at this. This is how you hit. And then that dude, Oren Burks, gets fined for said hit. Everything about that play was garbage.
At least you're not holding on to the anger about it.
No, I'm not bitter at all. Not at all.
Okay, so I'll try for you, even though I agree. I'll try.
Right.
I once covered a game, Vikings and Carolina Panthers, where Sam Darnold was playing against the Vikings. The score was 28-20, and they had the ball at the 2-yard line, and Sam Darnold led all the way down the field and tied that football game in about a minute and a half time. It could have happened. You get a 15-yard penalty. All of a sudden, maybe it starts rolling. I'm not saying that I disagree, though, because so clearly was he hit illegally. So clearly did he recover the football and was on top of it. And then someone else just came and took it off of him. And the amount that it changed that game, the Vikings down 28-20 with the ball, even on the 16-yard line, probably have about a 5% chance to win, if even that, because you have to score, get the 2-point conversion, and then win in overtime. So it's pretty low at that point. They got outplayed. They deserved to be where they were, and then they get screwed by a call. Had it been on the final play of the game where he's trying to throw a touchdown, maybe it's different, but it's in the end zone. It's just not the same.
No.
But and from the perspective of where I was sitting, I was thinking, if the Packers and Washington both win, we can get a home playoff game and I don't have to fly anywhere.
Would have been amazing. Would have been incredible.
The ones that are the worst are where it's reviewed and it's still
a billion
that's
percent.
the worst.
That's the thing. When New York is taking an elongated look at it and they still get it wrong. That's what blows my. Why do we even have replay? What is the point?
I will agree with you. Worst reffing mistake of the year, at least in the NFC North, goes. I'm sure there were plenty others.
There are plenty more. I'm sure people will nominate several others in your comment section.
Two more awards for this show. One is our second to last. Gonna definitely be better next year award, and the nominations go to Dallas Turner, Lucas Van Ness, and Caleb Williams. Which one is gonna be good next year?
I hate this so much because I gotta say Caleb Williams. I really do. And I hate saying it. I want to say Van Ness, but I've seen absolutely nothing to indicate that. As far as Dallas Turner, I think there's a decent chance he's better next year. But for me, it's Caleb Williams. Like you talked about before, you certainly saw the flashes this year. And now he's got a legitimate offensive coordinator to put something together that really helps him. I hate to say it, but we got to throw the Bears a bone at some point. And for me, these are the nominees. To me, it's Caleb Williams.
I think there's no question it's Caleb Williams. And you mentioned Ben Johnson building a program, trusting assistants, hiring people, managing people. All that stuff is really difficult. That's the difference between good and great or bad and good or whatever when it comes to coaching. But one thing we do know is that guy has an offense that marries the run and the pass as well as anybody in the NFL. And even if they can't run for 6 yards a carry with Jahmyr Gibbs, even if they run for 4.5, and
you're putting your quarterback in a good position. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of sometimes with these teams, they get a young quarterback with a lot of talent and they go, I need to do everything with him. I need him reading this, that. This is where Cliff Kingsbury was honestly brilliant this year with Jaden Daniels. That offense for the first half of the season was pretty straightforward for him. And that even in the playoff game, he's getting rid of the ball quickly and so forth. And then they layered on as they went along. It seemed like they wanted Caleb Williams to just learn everything in training camp, be a franchise quarterback right away. And I think Ben Johnson, play actions, screens, getting the ball out of his hands, has a great chance. With Dallas Turner, there was flashes this year. He just didn't get to play a lot because they had two guys that were all pro caliber.
Yeah.
And I think if Patrick Jones leaves, he'll kind of slot in. He's got to put on some weight. Like there's still plenty of room for that. What's the deal with Van Ness?
It's a great question. Everyone in Green Bay would love to know. I mean, they did fire their defensive line coach after this season. Rebovich got the boot because, he is certainly not developing the way they had hoped, to a point where, and here's the concerning part. It's not so much like, he's not really productive and didn't put up huge stats. And he certainly wasn't putting great tape out there, but he couldn't get on the field. The fact that they have former undrafted players, there's a guy in Brenton Cox Jr. who was inactive for 9 weeks, and then they trade Preston Smith, and then he's getting on the field more than the former 13th overall pick. That's concerning, to say the least. My one caveat here, and I keep saying this on my chats, is he is still a very young player. The Packers took him as a project. He is now going to be, for the first time in 3 years, in the same defensive scheme as he was the year previous. Who knows how he comes along as far as maybe he, quote, figures it out. That is the hope. But, man, the early returns so far have been less than promising. Let's put it that way.
With any top draft pick, it's such a hard thing from our seat because you want to give patience and you want to point out all the hundreds of examples of players who struggled. Rashawn Gary is one of them and then broke out. Khalil Mack got 4 sacks his first year, and then the next year he's got 12. There's so many players at every position Their first year, we all went, what the heck is up with this guy? And then he becomes really good. But there's always that tipping point of, and you brought it up, like trying to read what the coaches think of a player. And I think at least what we saw from Dallas Turner, him playing 25, 35 snaps in the last 5-6 weeks, told us that he was impressing the coaches behind the scenes, because he would not have been on the field otherwise if they didn't want him to be. So I think there were enough signs there that pointed to it, but he can't win this award because I think Caleb Williams has a better chance to break out than Dallas Turner.
Agreed.
But if Turner breaks out, though, and they have Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Turner, it's going to be pretty good.
I don't want to live in that world. I'm not living in that world. Nope, refuse to.
All right, best podcaster of the NFC. No, this is a joke. Well, this is a joke. It's clearly me.
Obviously, not even close. That's a runaway.
Hey, I will say before we get to our last award, I am happy for you with CheeseheadTV. You're a great guest on this show. You do great work. You're one of the only ones that I check in on to see,
sir.
Especially when things go wrong.
Yeah, well, naturally, that's if it bleeds, it leads, no doubt. I mean, that's not unlike when I was living in Chicago, man. Listening to the Bears radio after they lost was like one of the best times in my life. So yeah, no doubt. I feel you.
All right, the real final award is Best Outlook for 2025. Which one of these teams has the best outlook going forward for next season? I don't think it's the easiest question because the Lions are bringing back Aiden Hutchinson for that defense. The Vikings potentially going to a young quarterback. That means cap space spending, improving. They've got the coaching staff. Flores is coming back. The Packers, you've got, hey, it's been mentioned every once in a while on broadcast that it's a young team. Maybe like every quarter it gets brought up that it's a young team. Are they going to spend money, by the way? They don't like to do that in free agency. Are they going to get like T. Higgins or something?
I don't think it'll be T. Higgins, but they've got more maneuverability now than they have in the last like 5 years, essentially. And that's due to, obviously trying to kick the can down the street, trying to get back to a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. Clearly that didn't occur, but they've been dealing with the dead cap from that for the last couple of years. Now they have some ability. I don't think they're going to go hog wild, but I do think they're going to be better. And I do think if you're looking at these four, these teams in the NFC North, I think are all going to be better next year. But to me, you're talking about best outlook sitting here today. Yeah, you're right. The Vikings are turning to a young quarterback most likely, and that does give them, a QB on a rookie deal, which allows you maneuverability with the cap. But, man, they got a boatload of free agents coming up, a bunch of guys to re-sign or not re-sign, figure out what to do. It's a pretty significant transition, I would think, personnel-wise, in Minnesota. With the Bears, you got Ben Johnson. Who knows? We've talked about a lot of unknowns there. Defense, who knows what to expect there, although I think they'll be good. They got a lot of talent, and I do think they'll be productive on the offensive side of the ball. But Ben Johnson is an unknown commodity as a head coach, right? With the Lions, they got the coordinator drain. Like you talked about, getting Hutchinson back, getting a lot of those guys back. I still think Dan Campbell's hell of a coach. Got to think they're going to be really good again, no question about it. But to me, how is it not the Green Bay Packers? Not only are they have been the youngest team and now are maturing and growing, they have practically no one to worry about re-signing. I mean, they have a few guys here that, TJ Slayton's probably their biggest concern when it comes to their own guys to sign back in free agency. The Christian Watson injury makes things interesting because, to your point, maybe they get a little more aggressive in free agency, bring in a receiver or what have you. But, man, they're set on both sides of the ball as far as Matt LaFleur on offense. Jeff Hafley sticking around on the defensive side of the ball after a phenomenal first year as their defensive coordinator. So much has to play out this offseason, but they have the quarterback. Their guy is set. There's no mystery there. And hopefully, just give me a year where, our quarterback isn't hurt in week one. I'm bullish on the Green Bay Packers in 2025.
In Brazil, of all places.
Can I tell you, sitting in my hotel room after that game, a bunch of Packers fans that I had met in Brazil the night before had gifted me all sorts of stuff, including one big bottle of alcohol that was basically brewed in the Amazon and all this stuff. And I'm telling you, I cracked that thing open that night and had a big old swig because I thought Jordan Love was done for the season after one game. The fact that he wasn't was great, obviously, but man, can we avoid that next year? Because that sucked.
Yeah, nobody wanted to see that. Nobody wanted to really see a game in Brazil, but it sounds like a good time.
I had a great time. I had a ball until that play. That sucked.
I think when it comes to the Vikings for this, And we did a fun exercise the other night where we picked the 2025 Vikings schedule that I made up with their opponents.
I love
But
that.
I'm sure you've had the
That's
same
peak
observation.
content right there. I love it.
Yes, and we also don't know who's playing quarterback
Nope.
technically.
Nope.
So we did it if McCarthy was playing quarterback,
Sure.
and I think you've had the same observation. I'm guessing is the opponents for next year look a lot harder than
It
facing
toughens up.
yourself.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, big time.
yep.
Big
So
time.
we came up with maybe 10 wins for the Vikings, and that means they got to pull a few games against some really good teams. And I think that you are looking at kind of a transition of Rodgers to Love, where maybe the first half of the season it could be a little bit
A little
slow.
rough,
You
right?
could fall behind a little bit in that race as JJ McCarthy figures out how to play football, which ultimately can work out fine for them in the long run, as it is with Green Bay. But there is no way of avoiding the rocky transition of a young quarterback unless Patrick Mahomes arrives at your doorstep,
Right.
which is always possible, but
Who knows?
unlikely.
Who
Right.
knows? I will say, I mean, look, the thing with the Vikings or the Packers or any team, really, you want to win the division, obviously, but it's not a death knell if you don't.
Right.
The idea, something which is probably more important, is how you're playing down the stretch. And that's why it was really hard to get excited about the Packers' chances this year,
Mhm.
because they were playing so poorly. You know what I mean? And if you get hot in December going into January and you're on a run to the playoffs, that's what you want ultimately. So, yeah, if your quarterback struggles a bit out of the gate, yeah, that's probably expected, but it doesn't mean that the season's over or it's a failure or whatever. It's just as long as you're playing better ball, your best ball, December into January, then you got a fighting chance.
So who do we decide has the best outlook? You're going
It's
with
the
the
Packers
Packers.
easily. Come on, it's easily the
It
Packers.
just feels like I'm really giving you
You
something
take
there.
the Vikings, I'll take the Packers, and it's fine.
So it says for
All good.
2020, it says for 2025,
It
I'm gonna
does.
go with the Lions. I'm gonna
All right.
say, I know that Ben Johnson was good. I know that Aaron Glenn improved, I think, during his time, but
Definitely.
just roster, they realize they can just give the ball to Jameer Gibbs, that they don't need David Montgomery
Right.
to get 3.5 yard carries. They could just have the best player. They're really losing nobody, and they've got cap space and they've got a great general manager. I
Oh,
think
he's
that
done a really good job, no doubt.
would you be surprised if next year they only win 12 or 11, but they end up in the Super Bowl? Like I wouldn't
No, no, that wouldn't
if
be
it's
surprising
Detroit.
at all. Yeah, no,
And
not at all.
probably the most predictable quarterback, really, of all of them, like with
Truly.
Goff's history. So I'm going to go with the Lions, have the best outlook for 2025. For doing maybe longer term, maybe we could argue the Vikings on that one. So let's give ourselves a round of applause.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to
Well
all of our
done.
winners, especially Tyreek Stevenson and
The award is in the
this-
mail. It'll be arriving at your doorstep momentarily.
And I cannot thank you enough for doing this. This was really fun, and you did turn out to be the perfect person to co-host this award show, Aaron Nagler. So, though I can never truly suggest Cheesehead TV to a bunch of Vikings fans,
Please
it is
don't.
it is very well done.
Thank you,
Honestly,
sir.
like it looks good. It sounds great. I think you're really good and detailed in your commentary. So I do enjoy watching you to see what's going on over there in Wisconsin. So thank you so much, Aaron Nagler, for joining me, and this was really fun.
Thanks so much for having me, and hopefully we can do it again next year.
The 2025 Northeast will be wonderful.
We'll up the budget. It'll be amazing. Thanks so much.